Subcommittee recommendations that we're hoping to get all finalized up pretty soon. But Michael, if you want to join and take that over. And I should just say thanks to, I know there's been a lot of people involved in that, so thank you for taking the reins on that one. It's a lot going on in that realm right now, and I think a lot's going to continue to go on for a while here. So I appreciate you sort of acting as the cat herder on that subcommittee.
That's the way subcommittees go, right? Yeah, thanks, Brian. And yeah, so I'm Michael Orman. I'm the Air Quality Planning Section Manager for DEQ, and I'm was stepped in for my boss, Ali Mirza Khalili, who's the Air Administrator who first started to lead the subcommittee. And after he had to step away, I took over for him. So I'll go ahead and give an update on where we're at, and then talk about some next steps for the subcommittee work, and probably give some extra time to Peter and Tara to cover their topics on vision eval and STIP changes. Next slide.
Sorry, I have to pull up your slides, Michael. I didn't know if you were going to show them from your desk.
Oh,
it'll take me just a second here.
No problem.
No problem. I'll grab them.
Probably try and do that too. Carol, I'm just using the slides you made for me. So
okay, I'll find them then. Let's see
All
here.
Right.
Okay.
And just as you're doing that, just to note that, you know, I know you had some partners in crime there, so to speak, with Tara, and I think they helped out with that too, right? So
that's very true. Yeah, I'm going to offer some kudos to them as well as we go through the process here. Okay, so the subcommittee was formed to go over a couple different key aspects, fill gaps in data and tools that the executive committee flagged as needs, and then develop an action plan for analysis and kind of filling those gaps. And the goal is to have that done by 2021. And some of you may have seen these slides for the MPC earlier today, and so I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time on the content there. And if you have questions, definitely reach out to Tara Widener and Peter Hurley, who covered that presentation earlier today, and ask them those questions as well. Next slide. Let's see. Right, so we went through a couple different steps in organizing that work. We spent months with the subcommittee asking questions and getting more information and identifying those gaps and identifying strategies to fill those gaps. We organized those into 3 different buckets. So when you look at the report, you'll see A list, which is impactful with an identified lead agency. There's a number of those. A B list, which is impactful but no identified lead agency, and then a C list, which is less impactful but still beneficial and easy to implement. And the goal there was to hopefully make it easier for folks to be able to connect the dots between the work that was identified as impactful but didn't have a leader, and also, you know, give them a sense of being able to step up and step in. And then on the C list, those are things that the group identified that were either already being worked on, look kind of low-hanging fruit, and those are things that we can pick off as we go. And then as we finalized the report, you know, we noticed a lot of shifts in the policy landscape, and as that kind of started to change, things that were on the B list started to become A list items, with new agencies stepping up for the work. We moved some C list items up to the B list, and that's great. And you know, thanks to Carol for her strong project management leadership as we started to, you know, revise and revisit. She reminded everybody that you know, these documents are never done. They're recommendations at a point in time, and we'll have to revisit them as we go moving forward, because as the policy changes and the rules change and our priorities change, we may find different items on the list moving up and down that prioritization. I also wanted to thank Tara and Peter for their leadership and support on the subcommittee work. They spent a lot of time with Carol and me as we pulled this broader list, this action plan together with the subcommittee. A lot of work went into it. And then also just Carol, thank you for all your time and effort in helping us sort through this and drafting the documents and supporting the subcommittee conversations as we met to discuss. And then moving forward, the subcommittee is kind of in a holding pattern until the executive committee determines how best to move the final recommendations to the MPC and technical tools committee, and the impacts from ongoing rulemakings and policy discussions and how some of those updates and changes may impact our prioritization list. So lots of work there. And again, thanks to everybody for that, the work that on pulling this action plan together. So briefly, I'll run through the list of prioritized projects, recommendations. Next slide. The first one, this is A again. It's got a lead agency preparing future fleet fuel and emission rate assumptions. This is something that DEQ is going to take on, and we're going to work in the MOVES model. This will be coming out of Jeffrey Stokam's shop in establishing consistent emission rates that hopefully you all can use in your models and inform your work. It's going to take some time, but that's something that we've committed to do moving forward. Next slide. A2 is improvability to track and forecast progress towards MPOs and local GHG targets through the implementation of plans and investments. So this is ODOT lead with support from a number of agencies. Next slide. Improving the GHG and analysis capabilities for freight and commercial vehicles. DEQ is taking the lead on this one with a couple with ODOT supporting. And this is really important to DEQ for one, just because freight and commercial represents such a big driver in GHG emissions. And we're also working on a rulemaking, which I'll talk about during the roundtable updates, that hopefully will have an impact on those numbers. So we're interested in it. Next slide. A4 is improved data for travel demand management, telework, non-motorized modes, and TNCs and other emerging modes. And this is PBOT and DEQ and LCOG playing a role here in leading some review. DEQ has a program, the employee commute option, and we're looking to expand it potentially statewide. And so we're interested to see how that data is useful, and PBOT and LCOG are also interested as well. Next slide. Develop methods for calculating cumulative emissions over time. This is really focused on being able to calculate emissions as you change different travel demand management techniques. And this is something that we'll be working on closely with the LCD and Metro. Next slide. And A6 is provide an annual sector-based GHG inventory. This is something that DEQ does, and we're committed to continue to do, and seek support from the ODOT Climate Office and any changes that might need to be made to help inform performance metrics and work that you all do with informed by that inventory. Next slide. Dashboard and performance monitoring. So this is ODOT and DLCD taking the lead here. This is something that we're working on as part of the Every Mile Counts project as well, with performance metrics and monitoring. And we're committed to tracking and making sure that we're making progress on reducing GHG emissions. Next slide. Develop data and tools to assess GHG impacts of non-standard day conditions. This is ODOT taking the lead as well. And then next slide. Quickly, the B items, this is one that has a little star on it because it's B in the draft report, but as we had talked, as I mentioned earlier, that some of the items are moving from B to A and from C to B, and this one, PBOT has stepped up to take the lead here, and it'll be on the A list in the final report. And so I won't spend time reading through these. Carol, if you just kind of click through them, we can slide. So recommend as you receive the final report, just to take a look at the B items. And if you have any that pop out at you as ones that your organization might want to step up and take the lead on, that would be useful information for us to have. But we think those are informative. And then C list are things that are, again, low hanging fruit. And I think that's next slide. Right. So Carol's box there for comments. Please send in any comments to Carol by October 29th. If you have any, I think that includes any B list items that you want to flag as your organization stepping up to take the lead on, or if you have any of the A list or B list or C list items that you want to flag your organization is in support of, that would be useful info too. Again, thanks to the whole subcommittee and the folks that leaned in and participated on this work. This takes a lot of time and effort to do and stay engaged on, and a lot of good work went into it. So looking forward to this shifting to implementation and making some progress on filling those gaps.
All right, to Michael. So I think, let me make sure that I can see where we might have some questions. So a lot of information to take in a short period there, and I know we have time here for some conversation. So Jeff, welcome as in a different role to the meeting for you today. I see you have a question.
Thank you. It's great to be back. I just have a quick clarification. Thanks, Michael, for that overview. That's very informative. By the non-standard day, am I correct in thinking that you're referring to estimating like emissions, supposing there's a wreck on I-5 and things are gridlocked for 2 hours while the state police do the accident assessment or something like that? Is that the idea?
Maybe if we can pull that item back up, Carol, was that an A list item, Jeff?
Yeah, let's see here. I think it was I was taking a note. Yeah, it was A8.
Maybe if we have Tara, you want to take that one, Tara?
Yeah, I can chime in, and I think this is really something that TPOW has been pursuing. So Brian may have thoughts as well. But yeah, this is getting to the crashes that are not infrequent in a lot of areas. Also the tools that address those, whether it's ramp metering or ITS policies. So how do we get to being sensitive to those policies? How do we get our models to be sensitive to know that they exist to begin with?
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's see. Any other questions or conversation about this? I think, something I just want to link back up to, Michael, is Becky's comments earlier about sort of some of the longer term, what we plan to do with some of this work is really, I think, some of it we've already identified leads, some of it's going to complement other work that various agencies are, we're already doing around tools. And so, some of this will get into BMPC as we update all of our individual agency work plans, et cetera, moving that forward. And I think part of the conversation here that we've all been having behind the scenes is, so normally when we have an ad hoc committee, there's a certain time and a product, and then, you know, we discontinue that ad hoc subcommittee. And we've been struggling a lot with that one, because normally what that means is this one would be done, you know. But I think the struggle we have on this one is it's just, at least for the next year, you know, this is sort of a moving target, just because as you alluded to, we'll hear later about some of these rules, regulations, things that are going on that could shift that landscape a little bit for the analytical needs. So, so most likely what will happen, I think, is that we'll sort of we'll put that committee, we won't probably disband it initially. We're probably going to put that on ice, get some things incorporated through the MPC subcommittee. And then I think after things settle out over the first few months of the next year, you know, probably for me with ODOT to be working with Terra and Climate to say, okay, is there a time that we should get that group back together to revet some of these things and see if something's changed. That's my guess. You know, it's really up to the OMSC exec committee to make that final call, as you know, Michael. But I just wanted to mention that that's kind of, I think, what our current thoughts on that are. And of course, incorporating this GHG and equity, as well as Becky had mentioned, into the MPC conversations that happen quarterly around all the organizations that do a lot of the tool development and implementation. Ling, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, this is a question for Michael, probably potentially others in the GHG committee, or maybe even others in the OMSC in this meeting as well. So as you may be aware that the ODOT research statement call is underway. I believe it's due early November. So I just kind of want to see, because at least I can see, for example, the latent demand is in your report. You cite that some research done by Kelly Clifton in the report that I suppose it will certainly be helpful to have research support to push forward on that front. But at the same time, of course, different agencies will lead that effort, as you identified here, PBOT. So I want to get some idea. This is, of course, is just but one example. What are on your mind? What will be a few of the priority in terms of getting the potentially take advantage of ODOT research statement, as well? I think problem statement actually should be more great name of the process. So what on your mind will be the few that you think will be, okay, yeah, it will be helpful to have additional support from the problem statement or potentially other venue. I will probably just name potentially down the road, NITC, for example, National Institute of Transportation, and community, they have a kind of research cycle for RFPs and so on. So what do you think? What are the areas that will be helpful to have some research support, so that, again, certainly collaborate with those agencies?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You know, I think that induced latent demand, DEQ is really interested in the potential benefits from greenhouse gas emission reductions, but also criteria pollutants and, you know, ozone forming precursors and those sorts of things, toxics. But, you know, I'm just really becoming aware of the ODOT research arm and the potential there, kind of the problem statement that you're describing. And so I'd want to, you know, make sure that others on the subcommittee have a chance to jump in here too, the broader subcommittee as well, on what you all think might be of interest. But you know, that's something that I'm looking at and considering that some feedback that we might be able to provide to ODOT as well. Tara, I see you came off. Your
Yeah,
camera
Karen,
came
did
off.
you have some thoughts?
Yeah, so I've actually been part of submitting something to the NCHRP on this topic. So trying to jump to a national level to think about this, because it's quite a struggle and there's not a lot of nuance in the conversation that's out there. So I think what was proposed was sort of an understanding of, hey, building a new Mountain Hood freeway in a greenfield area is a little bit different than an ITS treatment where you're just slightly improving, the complex weave areas to have less crashes. So first trying to get some nuance there. And I don't think there's a lot of research at the level of, and this is where maybe answers your question, at those ITS policies, right? Theoretically, elasticities say when you get down to very small changes that they should have the same sort of percentage change, but do they really, and how does that work with perceptions? And how does that work if, the base state, if you start with high costs or high congestion, how does this differ? So I feel like part of the NCHRP was to kind of like make that scan and then identify where the gaps in data were and do some hard research on those gaps, but also just sort of get some basic terminology out there. What is, if you really look at the real definition, induced is bigger in land use changes and longer term, and latent and diverted are probably what's more going to happen in Oregon because we are quite constrained in our land use laws. So it also gets to the point where in Oregon here, from an OMSC standpoint, we have to communicate out that our land use laws are different and you can't just take national elasticities off the shelf and apply them here. So, those are the kind of things I think there's both a communication angle in that, as well as consistently, applying our tools here that we have, which are pretty good with a lot of the feedbacks that you would say for best practices here, but some guidance on doing that. So that's where the APM comes in here with TPAL working on that. And so I don't know, PBOT may have some other thoughts. I think I'm not quite clear what Peter's thinking about with his long range plan coming up. So I might pass the baton over to him to add to this.
Happy to do so. And I'll echo some of Tara's comments specifically about ensuring that what we do in Oregon reflects Oregon conditions rather than other states' conditions. I think our interest in this is primarily in the planning that we'll be doing both at the city and the regional level, and how, as we update our TSP, how do we take into consideration the potential impacts of induced and latent demand, and what that means for the region as a whole, as well as we participate in the region's update to the RTP. So we're interested in doing some scoping, hopefully with Metro as a partner, and we'll be talking with a number of folks, including some of the folks from PSU as well, about what you would like to see while trying to keep the project manageable.
I might just add one more thing. I feel like a lot of the research that I've seen, and this goes back to Jeff's comment at the beginning about the 365, the non-standard day, I guess it is. A lot of it just doesn't look at the non-recurring congestion, right? So I guess those are the ITS treatments, but I think, what's out there is an elasticity based on lane miles, and is not getting to the crashes, right? The non-recurring. So I would say, we need some better language to talk about those two things. And we need to realize that the tools are different for those two things, and then back that up with the tools.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
Oh,
Great.
great.
Good question.
Actually,
Go ahead.
if I may inject, I know you have a feedback period due October 29th. And then before this, of course, I got the message. It seems to be that this document at this point is just internal. Is there a estimate of when the final report or a version that's available to the public? I certainly would like to share the report with some of my colleagues that will certainly interested in reading this.
I can try to tackle that one. So I think the plan is after the internal OMSC review, we have a greenhouse gas subcommittee friends list. So before we final it, we would send it out to that group for review. And I think then that means the report would be completely final, and we could post it for public use or review in about January.
Okay. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Any other questions for Michael or others on the GHG related subcommittee efforts? Okay. All right. Thank you again, Michael and Tara and Peter and the rest of you, and especially, you know, Carol. I think most of us are pretty lucky to have Carol to pull all this information together. I know I appreciate that, the work on that.